Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Forum Daily West. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Manitoba declares state of emergency in Whiteshell Provincial Park due to wildfires. 2 people were killed in the eastern part of the province Wednesday, where fires burned there. Plus, Alberta's opposition NDP and special interest groups call for the resignation of 2 UCP ministers. And the Edmonton Oilers advance to the Western Conference Final after shutting out Vegas in a 1-0 OT win. Thanks so much for joining us. Manitoba has declared a state of emergency in Whiteshell Provincial Park because of wildfires. Premier Wab Kinew says officials are taking the danger seriously after 2 people died yesterday in a fire in the eastern part of the province. He says they want additional powers to enforce evacuation orders.
That will allow those who work in the Park Service and others in that area to have the emergency powers that they need to keep you safe.
When this started, I was right at the front where it started, and we knew right from the onset that this is going to be terrible because of the wind and the hot conditions that day. I was here at the municipality that day, and I watched the fire grow in intensity and roll ahead from here. You could see the fire gathering speed, and that's why all of those evacuation orders were so important. As it increased, we just kept pushing and getting people out of the zone. Wildfire services are in control here. We follow their direction. It's not that we're making this up as we go along. These evacuation orders happened that day for a specific reason, and it's truly tragic. Our community is in mourning because of the 2 people that were lost in that fire. And all we can say is if you need anything at all, our prayers and thoughts are with the family, friends, and loved ones that were lost.
Officials say there are 21 active blazes burning in the province, and the fire in the rural municipality of Lac du Bonnet remains out of control. A middle-class tax cut was one of Prime Minister Mark Carney's first orders of business after he and his new cabinet met for the first time Wednesday. If passed by Parliament, the tax cut will come into effect by July the 1st. Carney is promising to lower the personal income tax rate for some Canadians by 1%, which he says will save some families up to $840 a year. During his first meeting with his new government, several new committees were also formed, including a Priorities, Planning and Strategy Committee chaired by Carney and a new Build Canada committee focused on strengthening Canada's economy. One thing missing from Mark Carney's new cabinet is someone representing the interests of disabled Canadians, and disability advocates say that hole sidelines millions of people during what the PM promises will be a time of growth and rebuilding.
Not having that is absolutely a concern for us. A big issue for the disability community right now is the Canada Disability Benefit. It's supposed to roll out July 1st. If we look at the last fall economic statement, there's a lot of commitments in there that we need to see moved on. Making the Canada Disability Benefit tax exempt. That's legislation has got to get through. That will make a huge difference for the amount of money people with disabilities actually get to keep out of this benefit, right? There are lots of priorities in the disability community around employment, around housing, around all kinds of things, but that's the most imminent one.
Canadians are still waiting to find out the winner of a vote recount in a central Newfoundland riding. Elections Canada says it's hard to tell when a winner might be determined in the Terra Nova, the peninsula's riding, but officials have vowed to work through the weekend if necessary. Another recount gave the seat back to the Liberals in the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne, and Elections Canada says the result is final despite a misprint that led to one special ballot being returned to sender. The Liberals currently have 170 seats in the House of Commons, 2 shy of the 172 needed for a majority government. In international news, a meeting today between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin did not happen. Zelensky said last week that he would be in Ankara, Turkey today, waiting to meet face-to-face with Putin for peace talks. But when Putin did not show up, Zelensky is now sending a team to Istanbul for direct peace talks with a Russian delegation. On Air Force One, U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters he was not aware of any meetings with a Russian delegation.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
In response to Putin's no-show, Zelensky has accused Moscow of being disrespectful and wanting to prolong the war. The spring session of the Alberta legislature wrapped up last night, and not surprisingly, United Conservative members are calling it a success. Government House Leader Joseph Schow says the government made good on its promised tax cut in Budget 2025 and passed 19 bills. But the government also faced attacks from the NDP over the so-called corrupt care scandal. The NDP continues to demand a public inquiry into allegations of wrongdoing involving the firing of a former CEO of Alberta Health Services and bloated contracts going to friends of the UCP. Schow was asked about the often heated debate during the session and the lack of decorum.
It is one thing to argue and disagree and be frustrated with policy. That's the nature of the business. But when we devolve into petty personal attacks and what seems like unprofessional behavior, language that creates disorder within the chamber, I'm going to rise in a point of order, particularly when it's a personal attack against a minister who is putting his or herself out every day on behalf of the province, consulting, looking at ways to make the province better. I also think it's quite disappointing the way that the members in the NDP caucus have attacked the Premier, both in the chamber and outside the chamber in press conferences. I think it's quite deplorable.
But opposition leader Christina Gray fired back today, accusing UCP members of the same kind of behavior. As for the spring session, Gray says instead of addressing issues like the rising cost of living or the crisis in healthcare, the UCP pushed through anti-democratic legislation, dodged accountability, covered up corruption, and stifled debate. Gray says they're deeply concerned about Bill 54, the Election Statutes Amendment Act.
Not only have First Nations demanded that it be fully repealed because of the attack on their treaty rights and obligations, but also the Chief Electoral Officer and the former Elections Commissioner both wrote letters outlining how it would undermine people's ability to engage in elections, how it would undermine access, how it would undermine investigations. And the majority of the complaints that have been raised and levied against Bill 54 were not resolved, addressed in any way. And Bill 54 received, I believe it was less than 5 hours of debate across less than 2 weeks because it was introduced so late in the session. It's bad legislation.
And with Bill 54, she strips away your democratic voting rights. She strips away your ability to vote if your house was destroyed in a fire. She strips away the rights of students to be able to vote when they're away at school in their home constituencies. And fundamental voting rights are sacred as far as I'm concerned. She also is playing fast and loose with Indigenous rights. So today, I believe, I wasn't there, but I believe the Onion Lake First Nation today reaffirmed their commitment to fighting the Alberta Sovereignty Act in court. We've always known the Alberta Sovereignty Act is blatantly unconstitutional. And I hope that the courts will find that soon. Perhaps the Onion Lake case will be the one that allows them to do that.
Last night, the UCP government pushed through more changes to Bill 54. The government already made changes to the act to make it easier for citizens to gather signatures to force a referendum. First Nations and Indigenous groups have said any move to separate from Canada would violate treaty rights. The act now includes a clause stating that nothing in a referendum under the act is to deviate from existing treaty rights. In a statement, Justice Minister Mickey Amery says Alberta's government will always recognize, protect, and honor treaty rights as recognized by Section 35 of the Constitution. The government has also introduced an amendment it says will preserve the status quo and disallow mail-in ballots for constitutional referendums, which is currently the law. A group calling for 2 UCP cabinet ministers to resign loaded what they call the People's Bus in Edmonton and Calgary today, with supporters to be taken to Health Minister Adriana Lagrange's office in Red Deer. The group called Public Interest Alberta is canvassing Lagrange's riding and calling for her to resign, saying it's prompted by the situations in hospitals and alleged corruption scandals at Alberta Health. Justice Minister Mickey Amory is also facing backlash. The opposition NDP says he has personal ties to people at the center of UCP's so-called corrupt care scandal, and he failed to disclose the conflict of interest. Premier Danielle Smith is denying the claims. Well, Lethbridge police have charged a 57-year-old man in connection with the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl and say that he might have targeted other vulnerable victims. On April 21st, the girl was approached by a man in a vehicle around 9:30 p.m. near the 300 block of 3rd Street South. Video surveillance showed him interacting with the girl before she entered the car. She was driven to a South Side residence where she was sexually assaulted, then dropped off back downtown. The Chinook Sexual Assault Center has introduced a new 4-legged helper for their Child and Youth Advocacy Center. Meet Link. Oh, he's adorable. He's a cross golden retriever and lab and the new accredited facility service dog at the center. Link was provided by the Pacific Assistance Dog Society and has gone through extensive training to help clients with emotional support and provide a sense of security during what can be difficult moments.
Link's job here at the Child Advocacy Center will be to provide support during a child's journey through the investigative and judicial process. So he will do meet and greets with children and their families before they have an interview or maybe before a particularly hard meeting that they have to attend. He will attend police interviews with them. So similar to like he is now, he will lay on the couch beside them. They can pet him and find that kind of comfort or home-like environment. He knows that he's supposed to lay down on couches, so that's why he's doing that. And Link will also be used in the court process, so he is trained to do judicial work. So he can both go to the courthouse, where he will sit in the witness box if any children or youth have to testify in a courtroom, or he would assist them in our center with our remote testimony equipment, where he'd, like he is now, lay on the couch beside them and they can have that comfort while they go through their court case.
Oh, he was just adorable. The Chinook Sexual Assault Center say that they've been looking for 3 years now to find a service dog. Link will also participate in outreach and education opportunities in the community. Lethbridge Fire and EMS have said that they've lifted the local fire ban following plenty of rain and cool weather in the city. Chief Fire Marshal Troy Hicks spoke at Indian Battle Park on Thursday and said while it's encouraging that residents can use campfires during the May long weekend, it doesn't take much for the weather to change to initiate the ban once again.
And for how dry we've been all spring, we're still into spring, but just even late winter, we were so dry that the numbers were so high. And we've also already had 2 rather large grass fires here in the city. Down here in the river bottom, it is such a risk. I mean, if you look over my shoulders, you can see how beautiful it is. But even with this rain, you can also see a lot of the dead grass. There's so many just layers that are laying, even underneath the green grass, that's the risk of what causes fire. And that's why we put fire bans in. But luckily this week, with the moisture we've had, the moisture we're having now, and the forecast of what it's calling for, your typical May long weekend, a little chilly, some rain, we are going to be lifting the fire ban today. I do want everyone to know that there's also a good chance it will be back into effect. Hopefully not too soon, but it will be back in effect, I'm sure, this summer once we start getting that dry summer weather again.
Additionally, the city of Lethbridge has added 4 new spigots to the restrooms throughout Indian Battle Park. The spigots were installed for potable use, but also for lowering the risk of fire spreading from the nearby fire pits in the park.
Given the recent hot, dry weather that we've experienced, we thought it would be good to restore that water service down here. So we came up with a cost-effective solution to add a water spigot to the side of the 4 washroom buildings down here. So that water can be used to put out fires, can also be used for people for refilling their refillable water bottles. You can use it to refill pet water bottles or water dishes, those sorts of things. So we're happy to offer that amenity to park users.
Lots of times throughout the year, we do get called down to fire pits down here that are still smoldering that the people have have left. So I really recommend to people just make sure utilize these spigots.
Turning to sports now. 2 years after Bill Peters signed on as head coach for the Lethbridge Hurricanes, it was announced on Thursday that he will not be returning to his role next season in order to pursue new opportunities. During his tenure, Peters led the Canes to the Eastern Conference Final this past season and was nominated for WHL Coach of the Year. General Manager Peter Anholt says the whole staff and the players are grateful for the experience he brought from throughout his coaching career.
I think when the year ended, it was pretty clear that Bill was, he'd put in his 2 years here, and he's never really let on to me what he's going to do, but he's got some plans, I would think. Being a career coach, I think he kind of understands that. I think the players really understood how fortunate they were to play for Bill. I think that they understood that, he was giving them, pro preparation. He's engaging with the players. He talks with the players on a regular basis. Lots of meetings with the players. Like, the communication was really good. So we're really fortunate to have him for 2 years, and but it's time for him to move on.
That is your Forum Daily West report. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for watching.